Okay, so here we have we're reading a problem about a plant that when individuals with blue flowers are crossed with individuals with blue flowers, only blue flowers are produced. So we're going to take, a blue is crossed with blue, and only blue are made. Now plants with red flowers are crossed with plants with red flowers. And this says that sometimes they produce only red. Oh, man. Sometimes they produce only red. Sometimes they produce red or blue. Okay. When plants with red flowers are crossed with plants with blue flowers, sometimes only red flowers are made. Other times, either red or blue flowers are produced. Now, which gene is dominant? Okay, so just looking at this information, I would say that this right here is a big clue for us, because if you cross a red with a red, you could get red, but you could also get blue. Now, this is very similar to like humans. If we have like two parents who have brown eyes, they could, if we do a Punnett square of these two parents, they have a 25% chance of having a kid with blue eyes. So even though both parents have that dominant allele, it's possible they have a child with a different color eyes than them. Now, with the blue flowers, this is very similar to like humans with blue eyes. This is only possible. It'd be impossible for two blue flowers to have red. Now, when we see this third part, when it talks about red flowers are crossed with blue flowers, sometimes only red, and sometimes it's either red or blue. Well, this would depend on if the parent is homozygous dominant. If that is our cross, you would get the only red. But if the red plant is heterozygous, then you would get about 50% red, 50% blue. So when we talk about which is the dominant gene, it's going to be red. All right. Now, which is easier to establish in a pure breeding population, a dominant or a recessive gene? Well, here, so we have a dominant and we have recessive. Now, if we want pure breeding, that means homozygous. Well, I'm going to say that it's easier to establish a pure breeding line in homozygous recessive because you know if a person, for example, has blue eyes, you know that they're homozygous recessive. Versus if a person has brown eyes, you don't know which one they have, if they're homozygous or heterozygous. So it's easier to know for certain if something is true breeding or purebred if it's a homozygous recessive. Okay, so now tall is dominant to dwarf, and give the F2 genotypic and phenotypic ratios between a pure breeding tall plant and a pure breeding dwarf plant. So here are our parental generations. Now for our F1, I'm going to go ahead and do the F1 over here. So here's our parent. So all of our F1 are heterozygous. Oh my gosh, I just messed up, I'm sorry. So all of our parents, all of our offspring are heterozygous, so our F1 all look like this. Now, it doesn't tell you what to cross for the F2, so when that happens, you just kind of assume that you're crossing two F1s together. And so for two F1s, I guess I can do that right here as well. So to cross the F1, what we have what we see is that we get both tall and dwarf plants, and this is asking for our genotypic and phenotypic ratios. So to do my phenotypic ratio, So my phenotypic ratio, I'm going to look and I'm going to see that I have 3 that are tall. You can see they all have that dominant allele. And then I have 1 that is dwarf, so my phenotypic ratio is a 3:1. Now when I look at my genotypic ratio, I'm going to look at, well, what is the most dominant? Meaning like 2 dominant alleles. So I have 1 of those. Then the thing that's the next most dominant is my heterozygote. And I have 2. And then my homozygous recessive, 1. So my answers for this problem, when it's asking me for my genotypic and phenotypic ratios, here are my answers. Okay, next. If a wire hair is dominant to a smooth hair, so this is wire hair, which is like in dogs when it's like kind of coarse and not very soft, is dominant to a smooth hair. So I'm going to try and use like a, what is that called? Like a cursive, I don't know, a small w is going to be smooth hair. And it says you find a wired-haired puppy. So now this wired-haired puppy can be 2 options. It can be homozygous dominant or it can be heterozygous. Now, how would you determine its genotype by a genetic breeding experiment? Give both the genotype and the phenotype involved with the cross of the unknown. So this is actually what we call a test cross. In a test cross, what we have is we don't know if that puppy we found is homozygous dominant or heterozygous. So we're going to take the unknown. We don't know what that second allele is. We know what the first allele is because it's a wired hair and it has the dominant trait. So we cross it with a homozygous recessive. So we're going to cross it with a smooth-haired dog. Because now, when we look at our 2 options for our Punnett squares, here is like my unknown. So, out of our 2 options, we can say, okay, maybe it's homozygous dominant. Maybe it's heterozygous. So when we do our Punnett square, what we see is that if our offspring in the F1 are all going to have wire hair, if they all had wire hair, that would tell us that the puppy that we found, or the dog that we found, is homozygous dominant. But if 50% had wired hair and 50% had smooth hair, that would tell us that our dog that we found is heterozygous. So again, this is called a test cross. When you take your unknown, you don't know what the phenotype is, and you cross it with a homozygous recessive. And then depending on their offspring, that would tell you what your genotype is. So just another quick example as far as like test cross. Hold on, Rock. Test crosses go. I really do have brown eyes, but if you just met me, or let's say I don't know who my parents are, and I'm not sure what my second allele is, I could cross with someone with blue eyes, and let's say I have 10 kids, and all of them have brown eyes, then most likely my genotype is homozygous dominant. Whereas if I had 10 kids and 6 had brown eyes and 4 had blue eyes, then we would know that my genotype is heterozygous. Okay. For this problem, I think I'm going to change the S's to R's because I feel like my writing is so sloppy, we will get confused. Okay, so if 2 spots are dominant to 4 spots, give the genotypes for the parents in the following crosses. Okay, so I'm going to make a note first that 2 spots are dominant and 4 spots are recessive. Okay, so if I have where I have if 2 spots is crossed with 2 spots, so if and they give 4 spots, that kind of just looks like a math problem. But when we look at this, let me go ahead and erase that real quick and set it up better. So let's go ahead and go like this. So we have 2 spots is crossed with 2 spots. But right now, I'm not really sure of what these second alleles are because it just tells me 2 spots. And I see that this combination is going to give me an offspring with 4 spots. So 4 spots, though, is homozygous recessive. So now I have to think, okay, how could 2 parents that have 2 spots give me a child with 4 spots? Well, the kid has to get one little R from one parent, and then has to get the other recessive R from another parent. So we know that for part A, the parents are 2 heterozygotes. Okay, so in our next problem, we have 2 spot and a 4 spot yields only 2 spots. Okay, so we have a 2 spot is crossed with a 4 spot, but it gives us only 2 spots. So if we look at our 2 options for this one, we could be either homozygous dominant or heterozygous. Now you can do Punnett squares to double check yourself. At this point, maybe you can do it in your head. So if the parent in question was heterozygous, we would expect about a 50-50 outcome. But instead it's saying only, which implies 100% of the offspring are going to have 2 spots. So I'm going to go ahead and assume that the 2 spot parent is homozygous recessive. So that is that cross. Now, here, a 2 spot and a 4 spot yields 2 spots and 4 spots. Oh, cool. Look, I already did that one. So for part C, right here, I have my 2 spot and my 4 spot is going to yield 2 spots and 4 spots. Awesome. Ooh. But that could also, if I look at part C just on that question, nope, that's right. Okay, now we're going to go to part D. Oops. So 2 spots and 2 spots yields only 2 spots. Okay, I don't know how it used to be. So, that's most likely the answer for this one. You could, go like this, homozygous dominant for both of them. But really what it comes down to is it doesn't really matter what this allele is because every single individual is going to get a capital R from this parent right here. Okay. And then our last one, 4 spots and 4 spots yields only 4 spots. That's going to be 2 homozygous recessive parents. Okay. The allele for albinism, which is being albino, is recessive to the allele for normal pigmentation. Okay. And a normally pigmented woman whose father is albino. Now they tell you that because they want to let you know that she's heterozygous. Because if her father is albino, he can only have 2 little c's. So that means he had to give one to his daughter. But it says she has normal, so she got that one from her mom. Marries a man, an albino man whose parents are normal. Well, he's albino. It doesn't matter what his parents are. He's homozygous recessive. They have 3 children, 2 normal and 1 albino. So the albino child is like this. So if we do the Punnett square, we can see that there's the mom, dad. So the parents, when we look at the Punnett square, there's about a 50% chance of having an albino kid and a 50% chance of having a normal pigmented kid.